Last week it was Harvey, now it's Irma. Packing 195-kilometer-an-hour winds, the hurricane has flattened the likes of Antigua, Barbuda, Saint-Martin, St. Barth, and is now skirting Haiti, the Dominican Republic, bearing down on Cuba, and looks set to become the first Category 5 storm to slam into heavily populated South Florida in a quarter century. With 12-meter-high waves predicted, flights out of Miami are full, highways are jammed, supermarket shelves running bare. Just how big an evacuation is necessary? There's the cost in lives and property, the building up of storm-prone areas over the years, and while scientists warn against making a single extreme weather event proof of human-made global warming, the rest of the planet is left wondering, is there something it can do to mitigate the causes and the effects of Irma? Today in the France 24 debate, is it the storm of the century? And with us from Port-au-Prince, Ascension Martinez, Director of Program Development at the Haiti chapter of the charity Save the Children. Thank you for joining us. Thanks as well from Miami to architect and urban designer Cooper Capitas, France's former environment minister and a key advisor in forging the UN's Paris climate change deal. Brice Lalonde chairs the annual Business and Climate Summit. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks as well from Washington to Stéphane Algat for joining us, lead economist at the World Bank's Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery.
Hello.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and on Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. It mostly spared Puerto Rico, at least 3 killed there though, however, and it battered parts of the French and Dutch Antilles. Now, Hurricane Irma skirting the northern coast of Hispaniola. Ahead of the storm, the Dominican Republic was braced for the worst. So is Haiti, where residents still haven't recovered from previous storms.
When it rains, it's a problem because our tents aren't in good shape and we don't have any money to repair them.
I have no place to go. I have to stay here. I will live or I will die depending on how this storm hits us.
Ascension Martinez, what's the situation right now?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
All right, we seem to be having Ascension. We had technical issues. Let me ask you again. What's the situation right now?
It depends where. In Port-au-Prince, it is not raining yet, but in the north, northeast, northwest, the rains have begun, and it's strengthening as the day goes on, with cyclonic winds in the north and northwest. So it's descending down after about 5 o'clock.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to interrupt you because of the sound quality is poor. Apologies for that. We'll try to get back to you in a moment. The situation there in Port-au-Prince with the rain beating down, and it is a record-breaking storm again so far. Is it fair to call it a record-breaking storm, Brice Lalonde?
It's very difficult to say because each time it's getting worse. And I remember when it was Hugo, when it was Andrew, each time it was the worst. And remember, not long ago, it was in the Philippines, it was Haiyan. Terrible, number 5 also, terrible winds, 300 kilometers an hour and something like 8,000 casualties. So each time it's worse. So I think it's not the worst. It's going to be even worse. And we must get prepared now. We know it's going to happen more and more. We have to have more prevention. And of course, for the time being, it's rescue and helping the people with shelter and food.
It's already broken one record, says our science editor, which is for the longest period of time in which these high winds were sustained. And again, it hasn't even reached Cuba and Florida yet.
Yes, terrible. Just think of it. I mean, it's the speed of an airplane taking off. It's 250 kilometers an hour with gusts at 350 kilometers an hour. Nothing can resist to that. So obviously, we need to have new building codes after. I mean, people know how to do it roughly, but it's more expensive. We need to have help. We need to tell people, don't live too close to the sea. You know, everybody wants to live close to the sea. Even in France, I remember there was something called Xynthia. It
was a big storm on the Atlantic coast.
Exactly. People want to go back and want to sue the state because they say It's the state must protect me.
The French government had basically evicted people, saying you can no longer live there.
And they went to court, and for the time being, they have sort of gained some time. And, they want the state to protect them. I don't care. I want to stay there. So that's a real problem. In the next years, we cannot stay too close to the sea. We're going to have more and more problems. And if you see what's happening in the United States after so houses are destroyed, so you can rebuild with stronger and stringent building codes, and it becomes gentrified because only some rich people can afford to do that. Yeah. So you have lots of social impacts and things like that. So we have to think of it much better. It's going to be more and more often, so let's get prepared to it.
Everyone wants to live by the sea where the water temperature is getting warmer. Clément Bonnereau takes a look at why Hurricane Irma is so powerful.
Hurricane Irma has wreaked havoc across the Caribbean, leaving a trail of destruction on a number of islands. But how did it become a monster storm? Hurricanes form when the water temperature within 50 meters of the ocean's surface rises above 27 degrees Celsius, heating the air directly above it. When this warm and wet air rises, it starts to spin and condenses to form clouds, leading to a sharp drop in air pressure. Air that surrounds the low-pressure zone then flows in a spiral at very high speeds, bringing heavy rain, thunder and lightning. Irma, however, is no ordinary hurricane. It's now reached Category 5, the highest possible classification, with wind speeds of 295 kilometers per hour. Several factors explain why Irma has been getting stronger. High temperatures, low winds and low levels of dust from the Sahara Desert in North Africa, which normally keeps hurricanes from developing. Experts say Category 5 hurricanes will be more common in the future.
As global temperatures continue to rise, hurricanes will get more and more powerful. It doesn't mean we'll get more hurricanes, but they'll cause more destruction. And we're not prepared for such hurricanes. Even the strongest structures won't resist.
Other hurricanes coming after Irma, Jose and Katia are expected to grow stronger in the coming days.
Yeah, we're going to pick up on the point of what's making this storm so powerful. But first, let's hope it's second time lucky and cross over to Ascension Martinez of Save the Children, who is in the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince. You were telling us the rain had not yet begun where you are.
Begin at 8 p.m. Well, around that time, but that the rains in the north will strengthen in the coming hours.
We had seen reports from the French radio station RTL that some residents of some of the shanty towns in the Haitian capital said they weren't even aware that the hurricane was on its way because they don't have electricity where they are. Haiti seems to reel from one disaster to the next.
That is correct. It's 11 months ago that the last hurricane hit to the south of the country, Hurricane Matthew. And the shanty towns, as you mentioned here in Port-au-Prince, they are prone to flooding at any time of rain because of the fact that they are at sea level or below sea level where they're situated. And much of Port-au-Prince does not have and is not connected to EDH, the Haiti Electricity Commission. So, people don't always have access. There has been a lot of messaging going out on the part of the government. But, yeah, the access is one thing to information. The colleague before was mentioning about where people live and the dangers that they put themselves in there and the lack of good quality sites. It's not just about what the house is built out of, but also where. And there needs to be a lot more work done on mitigating that by asking people not to be in those areas, to be perfectly honest.
Stéphane Algat, when you look at a country like Haiti, which is prone to hurricanes every year at this time, what are some of the recipes that the World Bank is suggesting?
So for countries like Haiti, you have really the two pillars of action that you need to develop. One is, as was said already, prevention. And for a country like Haiti, the big trade-off is that people move to cities not because they like the view of the water. They move there because the city offers jobs and services and education, and we want to create those opportunities for people. So you cannot lock cities and prevent people from going, but you need to do it still looking at the risk to make sure that you increase the risk as little as possible, leaving the doors open for these chances for the population. And there is a second pillar, and right now it's what we should be concerned about, which is if a hurricane arrives, how to warn the population, how to make sure the population knows what to do, create shelters that people can go to, better buildings that will resist the wind. And after the shock, many people will lose a lot of things, and they will need help to rebuild and recover. So then it's social protection and all of the reconstruction work that will be very important. At the moment, that's really the urgency to think about making people aware that something is arriving and that they need to shelter, and start to think, and the government in Haiti has started already meetings to prepare the emergency and the recovery to make sure people can recover as quick as possible.
All right, on that score, let's turn now to Cooper Capitas. The storm expected to hit the South Florida area where you are by 8 a.m. on Sunday. We've heard authorities order the evacuation of low-lying areas. A similar order has been issued in neighboring Georgia for places in cities like Savannah. Is the information getting out there correctly? Is it right to order an evacuation? Who should evacuate?
Well, it's entirely correct. People should evacuate. But I think it's a little misguided simply because the zoning maps that were drawn have not been updated. And a lot of houses that happen to be on ridges or in parts in plains where there is no flooding happen to end up in the zones that need to be evacuated, which is a problem. And also, I don't think that evacuation zones take into account areas where there are food deserts or fewer gasoline stations for easier evacuation routes.
You heard Brice Lalonde there mention the example in France of coastal areas that got battered by a storm and where people want to move back. Miami Beach, what's the situation there?
So I'm not in Miami Beach. I'm in Coconut Grove, which is on a coral ridge. Miami Beach is an artificial island, and they need to evacuate immediately. Because the problem is there's a surge on one side, and on the other side, the water will go up through waves. So it'd be a miracle if the island didn't sink, actually.
12-meter waves could be expected? What does that mean for a place like Miami Beach?
Well, current zoning codes indicate that we have to build above 12 feet. And 12 meters would be, well, the ratio is 3 times more. So the effects would be catastrophic, especially in Miami Beach. And what's even more terrifying is what would happen afterwards, which is water stagnation. It's that once the water's there, as we saw what was happening in Houston, water might stay there, and it might stay a long time. And if there's no circulation of that water, well, you end up getting mosquitoes. And God knows tropical climates are really good to mosquitoes.
When you hear this discussion, Brice Lalonde, is this the fury of Mother Nature, or is this humanity sort of meeting its own doom in a way? I don't know. It's difficult when you're hearing the warnings that we're hearing.
Listen, I've been working on climate change for the last 30 years, I would say. And for me, I know it's climate change because climate change is increasing the intensity of each event. It's getting stronger and stronger. The winds are getting harder and harder, and the sea level is rising. So at one point, how many hurricanes will we need to get all to agree and to work together on better things? I mean, look, you need to build on stilts. I mean, otherwise it's finished. I was in New York when Sandy happened, and actually I must commend the mayor at that time, Bloomberg, because he really warned everybody. He had everybody to evacuate, and now there is a plan for a resilient New York, which is very interesting, as a very interesting model. So things can be done, must be done. All the cities, I mean, it's incredible the numbers of cities which are not ready, which don't even have a plan for prevention of hurricanes. In the Southeast Asia, the number of cities which are at risk is incredible. So we really need to work together.
Ascension Martinez, what are the plans for Port-au-Prince?
The government plans,
Yes.
they are not really known. They have announced, the government has announced that across the 5 departments, they have declared 800 sites that they are calling collective centres, which would be refuges. What we do know from past experience, in particular Sandy and other storms, is that people do not easily leave their homes, especially in Port-au-Prince, where they are the most vulnerable. They are the shanty towns, they are the poor, and they don't want to leave because they fear coming back to nothing, to everything having been gone. When such a large percentage of the urban poor live by petit commerce, that is, they live by the things that they can sell every day, if they lose their belongings, they lose their housing, they lose everything, and they have nothing to go back to. So the situation is very, very precarious for them. They are already the vulnerable poor. They're in the most vulnerable areas. And even rain, we're not talking about a cyclone hitting because Port-au-Prince is more protected, but even heavy rains does cause a lot of damage and possibilities of mudslides, etc.
You heard Cooper Capitis talk about the preoccupation of stagnant water once the storm had passed. What's the score where you are in Haiti?
That has been an issue in the past, especially when you're talking about low-lying areas like Martissante, like Cité Soleil. These are very poor areas where once the water gets in, yes, often takes a long time to get out and leads to then an increment of what could possibly be infections and different diseases. We know that there's cholera already here. You can see a resurgence of things like that if there is stagnant water. The mosquitoes, Zika, there's malaria, Zika, dengue, and chikungunya in the country. So all of those illnesses, those diseases, can see as dramatic rise after anything like this.
When we come back in the France 24 debate, we're going to look at the human impact on extreme weather phenomenons and what's being said elsewhere around the globe. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're tracking the movement of Hurricane Irma. It's sustained Category 5 winds already, making it one for the record books. Is it the storm of the century? We've been asking Asuncion Martinez, Director of Program Development at the Haitian chapter of Save the Children. Welcome back from Port-au-Prince. Welcome back to architect and urban designer Cooper Capitis, who is in Miami. We're here joined in the studio by France's former environment minister, a key advisor in forging the UN Paris climate change deal of 2015, Brice Lalonde, who chairs the annual Business and Climate Summit. And from Washington, Stéphane Algat, lead economist at the World Bank's Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery. Before we return to our panel, let's go to Miami. And France 24 correspondent Gallagher Fenwick is, I guess we can call it, an exodus right now out of South Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Keys, the southernmost part of the state, were one of the parts that received the earliest mandatory evacuation orders. People out there boarded up their houses for the most part and then took their cars and literally flooded out of the place, either getting to airports in order to fly out or simply taking the road up north in order to get out of the Sunshine State as fast as possible. We're now seeing similar scenes being played out right close to where I'm seeing in Miami Beach, that small island, if you will, that is connected to the main line by several bridges out there as well. People taking the state of emergency and the mandatory evacuation order very, very seriously, heading the call from local authorities to take no chances and to head out. Interestingly enough, where I am standing, which is downtown Miami, we haven't yet received that mandatory evacuation order, and I insist on that word yet because a lot of locals are telling me that it might be just a matter of time, 24, 48 hours before folks out here also are told to leave. Basically, this all depends on the path that will be taken by this monster storm, Irma, with meteorologists still, some of them hoping that it might take an easterly path, which would mean that it would barely scrape the edges of Florida. That's the most fortunate, if you will, scenario. However, the worst one, to a certain extent, would be that the eye would literally go over southern Florida, in which case this place would certainly get hit pretty hard. And if that's where we're headed, again, according to these meteorological experts, then we will undoubtedly receive the same mandatory evacuation orders. But for now, what I'm seeing in downtown Miami is a lot of folks simply headed to the supermarkets, stocking up on water and on other goods, and closely monitoring, tracking the movements of Irma and the messages being put out there by local authorities, both at the very local Miami level, but also listening to Florida Senator Marco Rubio, who has been giving press conference telling folks how to best deal with this.
How to best deal with the immediate emergency. Gallagher, a week ago, you were in Houston covering the record floods there. Is public opinion changing in the United States when it comes to extreme weather and man-made climate change?
Well, listen, it's a very interesting question, to say the least, Francois. In Houston, remember that Texas is a red state. Florida also went to Donald Trump. You have many people who on this issue kind of stand by the president's mantra, although he hasn't yet clearly said whether he believes in climate change or not. But remember, there are a lot of people skeptical about this in Texas. There were some in Houston. There are some in Florida. There are some in Miami, certainly. But what I can tell you is that there's an interesting choice made by the governor of Texas, and the mayor of Houston, who decided not to go with too many mandatory evacuation orders, because one of the scenarios that local authorities want to avoid is creating a sense of panic and basically flooding the main drags, arteries, and roads, freeways, highways out of the state with folks who are frantically trying to evacuate. So they're sort of trying to combine with very sort of localized evacuation orders and telling other folks to basically keep monitoring news and press conferences. In terms of the conversations that I'm seeing right now, or hearing rather, in Miami, they're certainly not about whether climate change is real or not. People right here have a sense of urgency. This is getting very close to a situation of crisis, so they're much more concerned with the immediate present, which consists in stocking up on goods, and for those who can, heading out of Miami. But that conversation with these two massive hurricanes right after one another, and with another one also, Jose, headed this way perhaps soon enough, that's definitely on the plate, and it's definitely a topic of conversation in Washington and to a certain degree in these different states that are being hit by these natural disasters.
Gallagher Fenwick, many thanks for that update from Miami. How about where you are in Washington, Stéphane Algat? Are you sensing a sway in public opinion, what with, as Gallagher just mentioned, Hurricane Harvey, and now not one, not two, but three big storms in the Gulf of Mexico, perhaps?
I mean, right now at the World Bank, it's mostly tracking Irma and looking at what it will do and the losses it will cause in the countries we're working with. We know that these disasters are contributing to poverty, and poverty reduction is our objective. So at the moment, it's all about monitoring what's going on and trying to help with emergency preparation, and already starting to work on how we can support reconstruction in a way that will reduce future vulnerability and future losses. Right now, that's the focus. The longer-term view, I guess, will come a bit later when we're out of this moment. But at that time, it's all about early warning systems.
Stéphane, how do you feel about it? Because on Tuesday, Congress voted billions in disaster relief for Houston. What was your reaction when you see that, on the one hand, we're talking about a city that refuses zoning, and on the other hand, the paying out of these billions of dollars in disaster relief?
So, I mean, to be frank, what I thought is that's really good that some countries can have this large-scale solidarity where the losses are being shared. And if you compare with what's going on in countries like Haiti and others, you don't get the same support. First, because these countries are pretty small. So we discussed the evacuation in Miami. Small islands cannot evacuate, so they have to shelter in place and try to go through the storm. And after the fact, they don't have access to what large countries have, which is sharing the losses and huge support like we will see in the US or we see in Europe after similar disasters. So from our perspective, looking at the role of the international community, it's all about how small countries with limited resources can manage recovery and reconstruction and what the international community can do to help them. We're offering tools that kind of replace the role that the federal government might have for Houston with solidarity at the international level to help countries deal with that. What we hope also is that every time we have a big disaster, can be Houston, can be what we saw in Barbuda yesterday, other places in the world consider their own vulnerability and think about what happens if they face a similar shock. And we hope to use the lesson learned, so the failures and also the successes of policies, so that other places can learn and improve the way they prepare for the shocks. I want to mention one thing because it wasn't mentioned, is the incredible success of hurricane track forecasting. We're now able to know like 4 days in advance about the risk. And this is why we can have large-scale evacuation, we can pre-position emergency systems and so on. And this performance is not randomly arriving. It's because we invested a lot in satellite and research in those fields. And I think it's a good moment to also realize that we're saving, as we speak, a lot of lives because we have made progress in terms of forecasting and early warnings. And when I hear that people in Port-au-Prince are not aware of this risk, it's a sad thing because what's missing is the last mile, right? We have this forecast. Now the challenge is to make sure that the warning goes to the people who needs to act upon it and that they know what to do in case of a warning. It's where we try to push at the moment, and we have entire programs, especially in Africa, but also in the Caribbean, to make sure all poor people also can benefit from this forecast that we're now able to do.
Very, very briefly on that point, Ascension Martinez, what can be done to make sure everyone gets the warning?
I think it's a very good point, and it's where in somewhere like a city, it is the trucks that can go around giving messages. In the past, after the earthquake and then the first times of cholera, there was text messages that went out to as many people as possible, where millions of people actually get the message. Most people have mobile phones these days, even some of them most vulnerable. So those systems have been used in the past. But what it does require is someone to have the funding for it. And at this point in time, it's not clear what the government has in the way of resources for these.
For that last mile of prevention and warning. Cooper Capitas, we've been talking about the South Florida, which does have the luxury of being able to evacuate. It's not a small island, even though it's a peninsula. How's it going in terms of, have the authorities made the right calls when it comes to telling people whether or not to evacuate?
They have made the right calls to people, to citizens in their homes. However, just take a walk in downtown Miami and in Brickell, and you'll see that the cranes are still up. And these are 45-story cranes right next to skyscrapers that are ready to be finished. And they're still up, and I don't see them coming down. And that's the kind of warning that, kind of shows this lack of preparedness, or I'm not sure what they have as a deal with between the construction companies and the insurance companies. Regardless, the fact is these cranes are right next to residential condominiums. And if I make a plea right here on TV, I could say, take them down right now. If Marco or Rick or Mayor Jimenez is listening to this right now, they should take down those cranes because they are a huge danger. And they should also do, during this evacuation, they should have drones flying around. People can volunteer their own drones. They should fly them around and actually look at where traffic is going. tell us which gas stations are the ones that have people waiting in lines. Because I waited almost 2 hours for my gas. And now I'm staying at my house because I do not want to waste a single gallon of it. And it's the same thing for water. There are lines outside of shopping centers like Publix or Whole Foods, and they're all waiting. And if we had drones going around and telling us exactly, through an application, telling us exactly what's going on, then people would be able to strategize around that. It would make the traffic flow a lot easier.
And as far as preparations, what do people do, for instance, when it comes to windows blowing out during the storm?
So you either get some industrial-grade shutters, especially for Category 5, or you put some tape and an X across your window just so that you can control the fissure of the glass. Because what happens is the air pressure outside is a lot lower than air pressure inside. So it's as if you're blowing into a balloon and, ultimately it'll pop. And that's exactly what happens with windows.
Exactly what happens with windows. And right now, when you look at the buildings in the neighborhood where you are, what's your reaction?
Well, the buildings in my neighborhood seem to be quite safe. A lot of people are putting up their shutters. The only problem is they're pretty low lying. But when it comes to wind pressures, I think people are pretty much prepared. As for some of the older houses that date, say, the early Coconut Grove houses that are almost 100 years old now, they've gone through their fair share of hurricanes, and many of them are made of wood. But they were designed by shipbuilders. And so these shipbuilders know exactly how boats resist to water and how strong winds can be. So those houses have survived, and I'm fairly certain that they will survive after this. The more modern houses, say the American Ranch that you find was built around the 50s and 60s, that one may suffer, especially the roofs. The roofs are not designed properly for those kinds of winds.
All right, another cautionary tale. Brice Lalonde, it's the cost of preparedness. And of course, the cost of preparedness is a lot lower than the cost of reparation.
Yes, but of course, as was said, it's more difficult to refurbish old houses. The overhanging of the roof, up, the wind takes it and blows it up and lifts it. So it's very difficult. Listen, I think all this discussion is also about adaptation. And of course, adaptation to climate change or to hurricanes, it's much more difficult in developing poor countries than in a rich developed country, of course. So that said, it's time to work not only on the symptoms to adapt to climate change, it's also time to stop climate change. And at one moment, people have to say, listen, let's stop sending in the air all the greenhouse gases, which are the cause of all these hurricanes. Let's work on a transition to another energy regime. Otherwise, we'll never get to it. And we'll keep discussing on how to adapt to, I don't know, hurricane number 6, number 7. We'll never make it. We'll have to get to the cause of all this.
All right, France's president, in the company of his Greek counterpart earlier in Athens, tying this storm that's battered the Caribbean so far to global warming squarely.
Mais cette émotion n'est sincère.
Our sentiments are frank only when what we say is backed by action.
Ceux qui les éprouvent,
when what we say after such a disaster is followed up with actions that lead us to its causes.
Et vous l'avez rappelé, l'engagement pour le réchauffement climatique, ça n'est pas
You spoke about global warming, about climate change,
et les déséquilibres de la planète.
And our goal is to stabilize the situation that the planet is now in.
À stabiliser la situation dans laquelle nous sommes.
Now, 2 remarks about that statement. First of all, stabilizing the situation of the planet, is that feasible? And secondly, some might say, hey, this is just one storm. And it's, you can't scientists may tell you that one storm doesn't prove that it's tied to global warming.
It's not one storm. You have a storm all the time. And after Jose is coming, and these storms are getting harder and harder. The intensity is getting stronger and stronger. Just exactly what the scientists told us. They said you won't probably have more hurricanes, but they're going to come strongest and strongest and more devastating. That's what they said. So this is what is happening. So of course it's very difficult. Can we stabilize? The main culprit is coal. We know that. It's generating electricity by coal, and after you have all the others, fossil fuels. So of course we have to first get rid of coal. It's not so easy. You have social issues linked to that. So we need a coalition to help the countries to get to something else. Natural gas is a bit better. Nuclear is, if it's affordable, is better. And of course, all the renewables are better, or hydro is better, etc. At one point, we'll have to do it. Otherwise, the situation is going to be untenable. How can you? I mean, it's going to be non-sustainable at all. I'm getting concerned by the fact that there's lots of hypocrisy, and I'm not going to name countries and people, but I really want to soon. You know, I was an ambassador, and finally, you should say the truth.
You told me this interview was at 6 o'clock and it was at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, Ascension Martinez.
Yes.
Your thoughts on this?
On the frequency?
Yeah, and also about, is it from where you're standing right now in Port-au-Prince, sort of a Marshall Plan for storm barriers that you need? Or is it instead putting the accent, as Brice Lalonde was saying, on reducing fossil fuels, the more longer-term goals?
Yeah. Well, I think if you really look at the specific case of Haiti, one of the reasons it is battered as badly as it is because of the deforestation. The fact that the poor people's coping mechanism is to make charcoal out of whatever trees they can find. The fact that even whilst it is battered regularly, the inability to prepare the people to reduce the risk is the major issue. Now, there's a lot of work going on, but yes, we have to do a lot more to reforest Haiti to a certain extent, to put up the natural barriers that would protect the population.
Stéphane Algat, where are the efforts being concentrated right now? You heard Brice Lalonde complain of hypocrisy at the international level.
So I think we should not talk about an alternative between making countries better able to cope with hurricanes and the mitigation agenda, so stabilizing climate change. There will be storms, there were storms before climate change, so making countries more resilient and able to cope with storms is a good idea anywhere. It doesn't remove the need to reduce global emissions of greenhouse gases to stabilize climate change because, as was already said, it has an impact on all of these risks, and we cannot do everything with just adaptation and risk management alone. So right now, what we are working on with many countries in the world are strategies that are both resilient development but also low carbon development. And there are a lot of opportunities in countries to do these two things together and to make them even like in synergy. So think of urban development. If you have cities which are denser and better organized, you will not need to build in flood zones, so you will save on the vulnerability angle, but also your city will be more efficient, be easier to cover with public transit, which means that you will have lower emissions and a lower carbon development. That's the type of opportunities we're trying to bring to the countries we're working in. And to be frank, it's working really well in many, many countries. In terms of urban development, a lot of mayors in the world are interested in making cities more livable and more efficient, and that's really part of that. And governments have invested a lot in renewable energy, trying to start shifting their economy towards a low-carbon development mode. So the shift started. There is a lot of things to do still, and as everybody recognizes, we're not still on the path to keep climate change below 2 degrees. So more action is needed. And when I say more action, I'm really talking about things on the ground, like more investments are needed.
More public and private investments. Just very briefly, because we're almost out of time. Cooper Capitis, are you feeling a shift? We heard earlier our correspondent Gallagher Fenwick saying that, well, those who support Donald Trump, they still think one way, and those who don't like him think another.
I don't feel a political shift. No. I mean, remember, we're talking about a president who said during his campaign in December that he needed climate shift or global warming because it was cold outside. It's unbelievable. And it seems to me that a lot of people tend to ignore that stuff. I know quite a few Donald Trump supporters here, and their positions have not changed. Right now, and it was discussed earlier, the issue is not whether climate shift is a hoax or not. It's, can I get out or stay safe from this storm at the moment? That's the mindset in Miami right now, politics aside.
All right, well, stay safe, Cooper Capitas. I want to thank you for joining us. Stay safe as well. Ascension Martinez in the Haitian capital, Port-au-Prince. I want to thank as well Stéphane Halgat and Brice Lalonde for being with us. Stay with us, though. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Nicholas Rushworth.
Hi to you, Francois. Hi to you, Brice. Media Watch this time looking at Hurricane Irma and the other hurricanes that are coming behind. Look, let's go to Plantou, the cartoonist for Le Monde, and it's expressing that kind of feeling we have here in France especially of the world looking on as these storms build up and take place in this horrific start to this hurricane season. There you can see Plantou with France looking at its distant overseas territories and the storm brewing there. Of course, that Macron is in Athens at the moment, isn't he? But he's actually been saying that climate change is the problem. He's saying he will go out to visit areas that are affected as soon as he can. Of course, that's brought out the climate change deniers. Let's look at this.
That cartoon, by the way, if you go back to it, showing how, you know, the French overseas territories of St. Martin and St. Barth are the ones that have been hit, and hence the torn French flag there.
So, and of course, Macron being very proactive, saying, yes, it's about climate change, and yes, he'll be going out to do something and see people and help on the ground. Of course, that is a stark contrast to what some might call the chief climate denier in chief, the Donald Trump here. The pictures of him online and the social media showing that there is a storm brewing, perhaps for him permanently on this whole question that he has about climate change, which he's a denier, saying that, well, I'm not big on global warming. I think it's a Chinese hoax, he said in the past. Remember those comments around about the time he ditched his America's commitment to COP21. Now, of course, the jokes there saying we know plenty of stuff about winds, hurricanes. We've got the best hurricanes. They're windy. So those jokes out there. Another one here for you, talking about which storm is the most dangerous, Harvey, Irma, or Donald. And this whole whirlwind around him is because he is being affected personally. Hurricane Irma just slammed into his Caribbean estate, is headed towards Florida properties, notably Mar-a-Lago, just north of Miami. And there you can see one tweet there arguing that he has a climate change nightmare on his hands now, because it's not going to stop with this. We look at the graphic more closely. We've got Jose, Camina, Luis, Maria, Nestor, Olivero, Pedro.
We shouldn't be too alarmist. These are the usual
of course,
storms
yeah, in the
season.
This start of the season is alarming. Now, of course, those names, of course, Hispanic. I won't tell you about the jokes that should Trump let the Hispanics in, that kind of thing that you see on the social networks. Let's go to this one here, Mar-a-Lago. Really, his estate is at the crisscross of various storms in heading towards the Caribbean and Florida. There, should he quit vacationing down there? So that's the Trump take. Will that all change his position on climate change? The fact that it's going to perhaps affect him personally?
Every conversation goes back to Donald Trump, it seems.
On a serious note, we can go to the mood at the other end of the spectrum, the real concern among people. Let's go to the Haiti paper, the Nouvelliste, which is saying that we are distraught, we're getting no information. That's a French language paper saying that the people who are the most vulnerable, you can see the photo there of just how fragile the living conditions are. They're saying they've got no information, but also no shelters. So they're just relying on word of mouth. So, of course, they have suffered dreadfully with Hurricane Matthew last year. So they're saying that they're extremely worried. Cholera, that is already a problem in Haiti because of Hurricane Matthew. And here Oxfam saying, well, listen, we've got teams ready to go, but just a drop in the ocean, really. just 9 response teams for the cholera situation. So a massive situation unfolding in these various Caribbean islands.
All right, Nicholas Rushworth, many thanks, and our thoughts are with the people in Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and other points of the Caribbean in the path of that storm. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank our panelists as well here in the France 24 debate.